Bluefruit EasyKey is a great device to wirelessly interface switches to your computer. It's also great because it can be programmed wirelessly using a graphical interface.
On today's episode of Make It Great, we're going to build a Bluetooth multimedia remote using the fantastic Bluefruit EasyKey. We'll start off the build by programming the Bluefruit wirelessly. Then we'll design and 3D print an enclosure for the build to make this project great. And then we'll finish it up by soldering everything together and assembling the enclosure. Let's make it great.
I followed Adafruit's learning guide on how to remap the buttons on the Bluefruit wirelessly. I then selected the pin I wanted to program, the type of keyboard, and the key it would press. And then I saved the map, and I sent it wirelessly to the Bluefruit. I designed and 3D printed an enclosure for the build that I designed in Autodesk Inventor. It's a two-piece enclosure with the top having the protruding squares and holes for the buttons, and the bottom just being a cover for the Bluefruit. Then I put some female header pins onto the header pins on a Bluefruit, and I marked where it ended and cut the excess part off. Then I taped them onto a permaproto, and I flipped the permaproto over and I soldered the header pins in place. I modified a JST extension cable to allow us to connect the battery to the switch. So first I soldered the male part of the cable to the outside pin on the switch, and then I soldered the female part of the cable to the inside part of the switch. And finally, I soldered a red piece of hookup wire to the other outside pin on the switch. Then I soldered two ground wires together, along with a black piece of hookup wire. The red wire was soldered to the positive rail on the permaproto, and the black wire was soldered to the negative rail on the permaproto. I soldered a red wire from the V-in pin to the positive rail on the permaproto. Then I soldered a wire from the ground pin to the negative rail on the permaproto. Then I soldered a wrapping wire from the top negative rail to the bottom negative rail on the permaproto. Two wrapping wires were soldered to a small tactile button, and I routed those wires through the 3D enclosure. Then I hot glued the switch to the protruding square on the enclosure. Then I soldered one of the wires to the input pin on the Bluefruit and the other wire to the negative rail on the permaproto. Lastly, I put everything back into the enclosure, and I closed it all up. On the top row of the remote, there's a play button, a stop button, a rewind button, and a fast forward button. On the second rail, there's a volume up, volume down, enter, and a key I left for future expansion. And finally, on the bottom, there's an up, down, left, and right key, similar to the arrow keys on a keyboard. When I connected it to my computer, everything worked great, and it controlled XBMC without any problems. It even let me control my volume. Thanks for watching, and check back soon for more awesome projects from Make. Questions, comments, build ideas, or projects you have made can be sent to makeitgreat@lewisproductions.com.